Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. It is officially the top of the hour. It is 2 p.m. I want to welcome you to today's public meeting. For those that have been here also supporting the RIC, whether in person or virtual online, thank you for hanging out with us and being here today for this public meeting. So we're here to talk about Executive Order 14300. Specifically, the title of the meeting is related to the rulemaking overview. The next slide, please. The purpose of the meeting is to provide an overview of how the NRC is implementing EO 14300, specifically Section 5, including a discussion of the agency's approach, a high-level overview of rulemakings the NRC is conducting, and an overview of the agency's compliance with EO 12866, which is the regulatory planning and review process. So how are we going to get all of that done? Next slide, please. This is our agenda for today. We're going to talk about the meeting logistics in just a moment. We'll also have our panel to provide some introductions. It'll be followed by a set of NRC presentations, and then we'll open up the floor to those that are here in the room and also those that are joining us virtually for your questions and answers or comments that you may share. Next slide. So for our meeting logistics specifically, this type of meeting is an informational meeting, which also includes Q&A. That means, as I mentioned before, you'll have an opportunity to share and engage directly. Participants, whether you're in person or online, you all will be in listen-only mode until the designated period to speak. All meeting guidelines, we ask that you respect them and follow them. We'll go through them in more specificity once we get to that period for comment, but please help us to work together and to maintain the meeting environment. And again, no regulatory decisions will be made at this meeting. Next slide. With that, I'm going to hand it over to our panel for introductions.
Good afternoon. My name is David Curtis. I'm the Associate Director for Operations in our Office of the Executive Director for Operations. And I have also since July been leading the agency's implementation of the Advance Act and Executive Order 14300.
Hi, I am Melissa Ralph. I am a Deputy Division Director in the Division of Rulemaking, Environmental, and Financial Support, working with the Rulemaking Program.
Hi, I'm Jen Scrow. I'm the Acting Assistant General Counsel for Rulemaking, Agreement, State, and Fee Policy in the Office of the General Counsel.
And together, just to explain this, the three of us represent what we refer to as our core team to coordinate the entire implementation of the Executive Order 14300. So I first want to just welcome everyone here today. This is actually a really exciting time for the agency because we've been working very hard for the last 8 months in terms of developing a series of rules that we're going to talk to you about today. And we're really excited to be able to then start sharing those with the public. I wanted to talk for a moment about my history with the agency. Before I came into this role leading the Executive Order 14300, most recently I've been working out of our Midwest Regional Office, Region 3, that's based near Chicago, Illinois. And in that role, I was overseeing an organization that looks at materials use, licensing and oversight, security at our reactor facilities, and we have partnerships with the agreement states. Most recently before that, I was also in the same region and I was doing work in terms of reactor safety. I also have a background working here in headquarters doing security policy and operations. I was involved at one time in new reactor licensing, involved in instrumentation and control, and also electrical engineering. I also have had extensive experience working in several of our corporate offices in the IT realm, in financial management, and also in administration services. I share all that in part because I think that it put me in good stead to be working in this particular enterprise. But more importantly, because I feel like over the 20-year career I've spent here at the NRC, I'm probably one of the least, in terms of time, in terms of depth of experience, of the hundreds of people who've been involved in developing and working on these rule packages. Just to put it in context, we have spent close to 90,000 hours of staff time developing these rule packages. It has been a significant effort that has been, a lot of thought has gone into it. I also want to share a little bit from, again, a context perspective, that even though Executive Order 14300 was signed on May 23rd, 2025, an extensive amount of work associated with these rulemakings was already well underway. And so it wasn't like we started on day one on May 24th. There had been a lot of work that went into these rules. Some of these were already rulemaking activities that were happening for several years. In addition to that, we feel very fortunate that the ADVANCE Act, which went into effect in August of 2024, we had already put a structure in place in which to take on major activities for the agency, in which we established staff working groups that were led by SES champions to be able to create deliverables that were expected under that ADVANCE Act legislation. Executive Order 14300 in many ways is specific direction about how the agency can implement the ADVANCE Act. And I want to help create that as one of several frames I'm going to be talking to you about today, about how the agency has approached this activity. If you can move to the next slide, please. So I wanted to talk just a minute about our mission statement. And the first thing I wanted to share was, it was almost exactly a year ago today that we had an ADVANCE Act meeting to talk about our new mission statement and to solicit input from members of the public about what they thought about that statement and any ideas that they had. And in the interim, we have officially made it the agency's mission statement. A lot of discussion has been taking place, both at that public meeting a year ago and in the interim about, the concept of enabling and how that sort of fits into the mission statement. But what I actually can go back one slide, please. But I want to talk to you a little about today is this language at the very end about, whoops, we keep going, we're a little too far back. About the benefit of society and the environment. So this concept about when we were working on this new mission statement, we were directed in the ADVANCE Act to look at these things, but it came from a basis that is actually in the Atomic Energy Act that goes all the way back to the 1950s. And it was very much envisioned by the creators of that law that we as an agency would be balancing the critical things that we always talk about in terms of safety and security, and this other concept of how we create benefit for society. And it's important, I think, to talk about that in terms of how we've been thinking about these regulatory changes. I'd like to think of it analogously a little bit to automobiles. Nuclear materials have benefit that they create. Clearly, the executive order focuses a lot on nuclear power, but there are many other uses of nuclear materials in the medical field, in the industrial field, in construction, in which the only reason that the NRC exists is because of those benefits. If it weren't for those benefits, we would not exist as an agency, because there'd be no need for us to do the important mission we do of protecting human beings against the radiological effects of those benefits that are created. It would be very easy for governments to solve the problems of automobiles, which also are incredibly useful things that can sometimes cause harm, to just never license any drivers. That would be like a really effective way to just not have any automobiles on the road, and you would have 100% safety as it relates to outcomes from that. And so the same thing would be true for the NRC. We could be extremely restrictive and just not license any use of nuclear materials. But in fact, we're mandated by the law to license the use of radioactive materials. And that is, our fundamental existence. And so we need to think very much about how to do that in an efficient and effective way. Okay, now you can go to the next slide. All right, so I already mentioned a little bit about safety and security, and I like to think about this in terms of my day-to-day interactions and the decades that I've been with the agency. It's rarely a day that goes by that I don't have some conversation with folks that I work with about safety and security. When I think about the last 8 months and the development of these rules, I would say that those conversations have increased. And it's a little bit in part because we're trying to think about how we balance that critical objective that we have with this concept of enabling. And that's much of the conversations we've had as we've been developing these rules. Actually, if you want to go to the next slide. So I mentioned a little bit about when the executive order came in, the very first thing we did was we looked at all the pieces and parts. So if you go out and read Executive Order 14300 and you read Section 5, there are an itemization of specific things that we were asked to do, and they're labeled A through J. And each one of those, effectively, there was a working group established. But in addition to that, if you read the sort of preamble in Section 5, it talks about a wholesale revision of the regulation. And so we looked very critically at ourselves and other things that we could be doing that are in the intent of the executive order. So there are other rulemaking packages we're going to be talking about in detail that go beyond that A through J. And we established working groups for every single one of those that at a minimum involve several technical experts that know that particular area, a legal expert, and a rulemaking expert, and they're headed all by an executive sponsor to make sure that we stay on track and keep on schedule and be able to deliver these things in the timeline that we've been given. Very early on, we had a series of alignment meetings after folks had a chance to just kind of think about what they were doing with the executives at the top of the agency to make sure we all were in agreement about what we were going to do with each one of these rulemaking packages. One of the things that was really valuable about that early alignment is because we're on this extremely fast timeline, that when the packages actually started moving through the review process and it got to that stage where the most senior members of the agency were looking at it, they had a very good idea already about what they were going to see. And only on, in my experience, pretty rare occasion did we have to do any, reasonably significant rework. That for the most part, we kept that alignment all the way through. I wanted to mention here too that, our commission, who's been working extremely diligently to review these rules and under extraordinarily tight timelines compared to what the agency historically has done, we worked in partnership with the commission offices to figure out ways in which we could help them with those reviews, whether it be helping to provide more staff that could aid the commissioners in those reviews, giving them, additional time through preview copies so that they were prepared. But I just wanted to make sure that people understand the commission has, even though they're moving quickly, they've had the time that they've needed to be able to make the decisions that they have to make that are responsible and sensible and maintain their independence. Okay, next step, please. Next slide. There we go. So if you read the executive order again, there's actually a fair amount of discussion about, specific direction we were given partnering with other federal agencies. And there's been, a fair amount of discussion about this outside of the agency. I just wanted to clear the air about a couple of things. We've always had partnership with other federal agencies, and probably most of all with the Department of Energy, just because of the nature of the business that they do and the nature of the business we do. We have many other federal partnerships also that are dependent upon our regulation, that have co-regulation that is tightly intertwined. And the executive order only pinpointed the fact that as we're doing this particular regulatory effort, we need to be in lockstep as a federal government. Most importantly, so that all of our stakeholders, whether it be those who apply for licenses or have licenses, or members of the public, understand exactly what our rules are and that we're being coherent and consistent across the federal government, and that we, the NRC, aren't standing out. One thing that has been really interesting about that process, in my observation, is that, if anything, in the past, the NRC has kind of seen a little bit out to the side of some of the other federal agencies. And as we have been engaging more with them over the last several months, if anything, only respect from those other agencies towards what the NRC does has grown. And to me, that's a wonderful thing, that people can understand the value of what we provide, both to the federal government and to the society as a whole. I want to make something really clear, and for those of you who attended our regulatory information conference this week or saw any of the plenary sessions online, our commission is as independent as it has ever been. And when it comes to these rulemakings in particular, they are still the ones making the decisions about what the text of the rules is, how we're explaining those rules, and they come to agreement, as they always have, about what gets published as a Federal Register notice. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so this is not the best atom in the world because the electrons are enormous, but I wanted to make a point about how I like to think about these rules. And although this is a bit of a simplification, there are two major categories that I see in the rule packages, and we're going to again be talking about them in more detail in a minute. One of the most important ones is that we have been, for more than a decade, from external pressures, most importantly from Congress and from successive administrations, to be much more timely in our licensing actions. And so a lot of the rule changes that we're proposing have got to do with structural changes in our regulation that allow us to do things on those timelines that are expected by our external stakeholders. Another important category of changes is associated with reducing regulatory burden, and I want to give a couple of examples of what I mean by that. As our existing regulations were promulgated, they were done by intelligent people with incredibly good intent, but some of our regulations are decades old. There have been technological changes since that time. There's been a lot of experience that we've had in overseeing those regulations, and some of those things don't make any sense anymore in terms of being able to provide adequate protection and ensure safety and security of the American public. And so we looked very carefully at those, and where we could reduce burden both on licensees and ourselves and applicants, and still maintain the safety and security that we always have, we took advantage of an opportunity to propose changes there. And so that's what I mean when I talk about reductions in burden. Next slide, please. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa to start talking a little bit about the rules.
Okay. The rules and timelines, and there's a lot of material here, so I'll go through this relatively quickly so that we leave some time for Q&A. So under the EO 14300 umbrella, we have 20 rules under development. 16 of those are your normal notice and comment rulemakings, with 5 direct final rules, one of which has already been completed. In addition, there are 6 straight to final rules, 2 of which have been completed. Both implement EO 14300, and some of those, all of the rulemakings, implementing EO 14300, and some of which were already in progress, as David mentioned, and we kind of folded those in to the overall EO response effort. The executive order directs the NRC to publish the final rules no later than November 23rd, 2026, which is 18 months after the EO is signed. And so for those of you online, you could probably copy and paste this. Those of you in the room, you'll have to get the meeting summary here, but there's a link here and it's easily found on our public website on where you can find the information about our planned rulemaking activities, their priority and schedule. Next slide, please. All right, so the proposed rules. Next slide again. First one, streamlining contested adjudications and licensing proceedings. This rule has been published. You can see here the RIN number and the affected parts of the CFR. This rule shortens the anticipated duration of contested hearings to fit within the licensing timelines. It does that by imposing more stringent deadlines throughout the adjudication, requiring evidentiary hearings to commence as soon as practicable if claims opposing the application, i.e. contentions, are admitted for the hearing. Allowing the presiding officer to tailor the hearing procedure to the contested issue in question, and requiring participants to provide more information in initial filings. That rule was published on March 3rd, and the public comment period end date for that rule is April 2nd of this year. Next slide, please. The fee rule, revision to fee schedules for fiscal year 2026. That rule, consistent with the NEMA, the Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act. The NRC conducts this rulemaking annually to recover to the maximum extent practicable approximately 100% of the NRC's total budget authority for the fiscal year, less the budget authority for excluded activities. This proposed fee rule would establish fixed caps on Part 10 CFR Part 170 service fees to implement Section 5A of EO 14300. Proposed changes include a table of categorical caps for requested activities of the Commission that involve issuance of final safety evaluation, a process for lowered, tailored caps based on the specific application, a definition of applicant failure, which would be the sole basis for increasing the fixed fee cap, and procedures for fee cap disputes. That rule was estimated to be published March 19th, but it was published today. Okay, next slide, please. Licensing requirements for microreactors and other low consequences reactors. This rule establishes risk-informed and performance-based regulatory frameworks for rapid licensing of new microreactors and other low consequence reactors and for high volume deployment of such reactors. It provides a flexible set of licensing pathways, reduces regulatory burden, and ensures that safety and security requirements remain commensurate with the potential hazards posed by the specific facilities. Estimated publication date for that rule is March 23rd of this year. Next slide, please. Modernizing requirements related to physical protection of Category 1 and Category 2 quantities of radioactive material. This is only exclusive to 10 CFR Part 37. It aims to modernize the NRC's regulations on the physical production of Category 1 and 2 quantities of radioactive material to enhance efficiency, including by revising requirements related to the reinvestigation of individuals with unescorted access every 10 years and providing the NRC with reviewing official trustworthiness and determination certifications, the frequency of refresher security training, and coordination with local law enforcement, maintenance and testing program, and weekly verification of Cat 2 material, along with mobile device requirements. Estimated publication date for this rule is April 1st of this year. Next slide, please. Modernizing NRC regulations for byproduct material use. This rule amends regulations for decommissioning financial assurance for sealed and unsealed radioactive materials and modernizes regulations for byproduct material use. It establishes new classes of general licenses by creating low-burden registration programs in 10 CFR Part 31. Estimated publication date for this rule is April 1st of this year. Next slide, please. Modernizing materials licensing. This rule enables the deployment of advanced technologies to reduce unnecessary burden for existing facilities related to the use of special nuclear material, storage, and security. Significant changes proposed to fuel cycle facility licensing, provide a new pathway for single-step licensing of reprocessing facilities, allow for streamlined licensing of DOE-approved pilot fuel lines, and modernizes fuel cycle facility licensing and reduces facility construction timelines. Estimated publication for this rule is April 6th of this year. Next slide, please. NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act requirements. This rule streamlines implementation of NEPA, alleviates unnecessary regulatory burdens, expands flexibilities for applicants and licensees while complying with environmental requirements. And estimated publication of the NEPA rule is April 9th of this year. Next slide. All right, NRC reviews of reactor designs previously authorized. This rule establishes an explicit NRC licensing pathway for previously proven reactor designs that have been authorized, constructed, and successfully operated by DOE or DOW. It involves development of regulated guidance that would summarize key NRC requirements with a focus on foundational safety analysis report content, and our estimated publication date is April 9. Next slide, please. Modernizing reactor licensing safety oversight and siting practices. The proposed changes would address 17 issues in 4 main areas. They are accelerating new reactor construction, introducing operational efficiencies, making current regulations technology inclusive, risk informed, and/or performance based, and extending license or permit durations. That rule is estimated to be published on April 20th. Next slide, please. Reducing barriers to medical use licensing. The proposed rule updates training, experience, and education requirements for licensees to reduce unnecessary burden and match current clinical practices. Expands regulatory flexibility to allow for innovation and ease pathways to licensing for upcoming FDA-approved technologies. It also establishes more efficient licensing for well-established and emerging medical technologies by creating clear regulatory pathways for applicants, and it reduces redundant and overly prescriptive requirements, modernizing radiation safety practices, and aligning oversight with clinical risk. That rule is estimated to publish April 27th. Next slide, please. Reforming and modernizing the NRC's radiation protection framework. This rule amends the NRC's regulations to revise radiation protection regulatory framework to support national policy statements in Section 5B of EO 14300 and Section 3A of EO 14154. It reconsiders reliance on the linear no threshold model for radiation exposure and the as low as reasonably achievable, or ALARA standard. That rule is estimated to publish April 30th. Next slide, please. ISR monitoring and decommissioning timelines. This rule increases efficiency by establishing risk-informed requirements for specific ISR facilities, increases flexibility regarding the timing of completion of decommissioning of power and non-power reactors by removing restrictive criteria and leveraging established processes. It increases licensing flexibility by restructuring regulations and extending timeframes related to the initiation of decommissioning of nuclear materials facilities. Finally, it streamlines extension request reviews for both reactors and materials facilities. And that rule is estimated to be published May 5th. Next slide, please. Modernizing package certification requirements. This rule adds regulatory flexibility by establishing risk-informed and performance-based methods for applicants to demonstrate compliance with transportation requirements for package design certifications. It modernizes radioactive materials transportation package certification requirements for shipments of transportable microreactors and other large Type B packages, and streamlines requirements to reduce burden on applicants and reduce application review timelines. This rule is expected to publish on or around May 13th. Next slide, please. Modernizing security requirements. This rule reduces prescriptive requirements and shifts towards a more performance-based approach for security. It reduces unnecessary burdens and expands flexibility for applicants and licensees while maintaining safety and security. Estimated to publish June 5th. Next slide, please. Regulatory enhancements for reactor licensing, decommissioning, and operational oversight. Proposed amendments to several topical areas are included this rule, among other things, revisions to non-emergency event reporting requirements for power reactors, rescission or revision of certain standard design approval requirements, revising backfitting and issue finality regulations in part to address EO 14305F, revising decommissioning regulations, including to accommodate prompt decommissioning post-shutdown and to reduce unnecessary burdens for decommissioning trust funds, updating definitions and reporting obligation across multiple parts, and eliminating outdated or redundant regulatory provisions. This one's estimated published June 6th. Next slide, please. Integrated low-level radioactive waste disposal. This rule requires new and revised site-specific technical analyses and permits the development of site-specific criteria for low-level radioactive waste acceptance based on the results of those analyses. It proposes to authorize the land disposal of certain greater than Class C, GTCC waste streams in near-surface disposal facilities and specialized land disposal facilities. Estimated to publish June 30th. Next slide, please. Right. So if the proposed notice and comment rules wasn't enough, we have our direct final rules. Next slide. Exemption from foreign ownership, control, or domination, FOCD. This rule amends the NRC's regulations to comply with Section 301 of the Advance Act, which has designated certain exceptions from the foreign ownership, control, or domination provisions set forth in the Atomic Energy Act of 1954 as amended. The rulemaking would affect applicants and licensees of utilization facilities that are owned, controlled, or dominated by a foreign entity, and that's estimated to publish April 10th. The rescission of advisory committee on reactor safeguards functions, the ACRS rule. This rule adjusts the role of ACRS in reviewing new and novel reactor safety issues, revises several NRC regulations to the minimum necessary to fulfill this committee's statutory obligations. That rule is estimated to publish June 30th. Next slide. NRC Modernization of Federal Advisory Committee Act Alignment, Access, and Security. This rule amends the NRC's regulations to align with Committee Management Secretariat Federal Advisory Committee Act requirements, FACA requirements, streamlines procedural provisions, and reflects current government-wide criteria for security clearance eligibility. And that one's estimated to publish July 2nd. Exemptions from material licensing. This rule aims to modernize the NRC's Schedule B exempt quantity licensing thresholds, updates the regulations to provide DOE contractors with automatic exemptions to work in NRC jurisdiction while below certain quantities of byproduct material or byproduct source and special nuclear material while performing temporary training activities. And that's estimated to publish July 2nd. All right, so before I turn it over to Jen, I should note, you've heard me say over and over in these slides that the rules are estimated to publish by a certain date. Jen's going to talk a little bit about our interactions with our interagency colleagues. And of course, we are, as David mentioned, working to make sure that we're really fully aligned internally. So these dates are our best projections for when these rules may publish. If we're able to get them out earlier, we'll do so. Just keep tabs on that website that we referenced earlier for the latest updates to the schedules. And I'll turn it over to Jen.
Thanks, Melissa. So I'm going to talk briefly about the Executive Order 12866 regulatory planning and review process. I know it's new to the NRC and many of our stakeholders, so just hope to demystify the process a bit. Next slide. So what is Executive Order 12866 and how did we get here? So at a high level, Executive Order 12866 sets up an interagency review that is coordinated through the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, OIRA, and they're located in the Office of Management and Budget, OMB. And the goal of this interagency review is really twofold. One, rigorous examination of the costs and benefits of an action, and then also to avoid inconsistent, incompatible, or duplicative policies. So one agency having a rule that contradicts another agency's rule. The executive order was issued in 1993 and it's been reaffirmed by every president since. And even before that, there were predecessor executive orders laying out a similar interagency review process. Historically, the NRC was excluded from this regulatory review process. Last year, Executive Order 14215 removed that exclusion, and then subsequently OMB issued guidance on April 17th, 2025 about how independent agencies like the NRC can conform to this process. Next slide. Right, so I'm going to go into a little bit more of the mechanics. So executive order, this process only applies to so-called regulatory actions. At a high level, I won't worry with the very legalistic definition, but at a high level, it includes most rulemaking and guidance that the federal government puts out. So obviously the 14300 rulemakings we're talking about here are regulatory actions. So once you know you're dealing with a regulatory action, the next step is the regulatory action significant? Significant is define the executive order, and there's various criteria. I put the two kind of big ones that people are most familiar with on the slide. It's a regulatory action that may have an annual effect on the economy of 100 million or more, raises novel legal or policy issues. So OIRA only performs the full review of significant regulatory actions. So in this step, we are submitting a significance determination to OIRA, and then OIRA will determine whether the action is significant. If the regulatory action is significant, then we have the full interagency review under 12866. So NRC would submit the rule to OIRA. It would be sent around to the other agencies. The NRC would receive and disposition comments, and then once the review is complete, OIRA would conclude, and the agency can proceed to publication. OIRA has a public website where you can actually see the rules for each agency that are actively under OIRA's review, and you can also see the rules for which they have concluded on. During the regulatory review process, any member of the public can request what's called a 12866 meeting with OIRA and the relevant agency to discuss the stakeholders' views, concerns with the action while it's under 12866 review. OIRA recently came out with guidance that for deregulatory actions, which we anticipate most, if not all, of these rulemakings to be, that the goal timeframe for review is 28 days. As of this morning, we have NRC has 8 rules currently with OIRA. Of those, 4 are some of the rules that Melissa talked about related to Executive Order 14300, including the FOCD Direct Final Rule, modernizing physical protection of Category 1 and 2 quantities, the microreactor rule, and modernizing regulations of byproduct material use. And also say Part 53, which I know is a big interest to the community, is also currently under the 12866 review process. Next slide. I think that's all I have on OIRA. Thank you.
Okay, so before we go to question and comment, there's one other thing that we want to talk about. And I don't know if someone can project. Okay. So one thing, I assume that many of you here today have had some interest in Executive Order 14300 rulemakings up until now, and have probably attempted to get information about it through our website and at times been frustrated. I know sometimes I've been frustrated by it. So this week we are unveiling a new approach and an easier way to get at the information that I think you all would like to have moving forward. And so, I'm able to bring it full in the screen. Okay, if you go out to nrc.gov, you will see that there's a banner right here up at the top of the page that talks about Executive Order 14300 and the Advance Act. If you can click through there, there's a lot of information you can get to, and this has been there for a long time. But what is different today is if you go to the, trying to see where it is. There we go. So it's at the very first block there. It says wholesale review of regulations. If you now click on that, it'll take you to a page that, and if you can scroll down a little bit, there's a table here now that has a list of every single one of the rules that Melissa just went through. And what it has here is it's going to be able to allow you to link when the rules get published to the Federal Register notice. It will provide you information about public meetings that we intend to have. And it will basically be a one-stop shop, and we're going to be keeping this updated as changes take place. As Melissa was just pointing out, as dates change, this will be the place you can go to find out about where those date adjustments may happen. But we're trying to make it easier for all of our stakeholders to be able to get this information, so you'll be able to help us when the public comment period starts to provide us meaningful feedback so that we can use that as we're developing our final rules. And one last thing I'm going to say before we turn it over. So you may notice on our slides, we have a banner on there that talks about NRC Forward. And, this effort is definitely very much forward looking in terms of the agency that we are growing towards. But I hope that from my earlier comments, you can see that it is based very much in the foundation of the things that we've been good at for a very long time, and taking a careful review of how we've done business in the past and what we can do better moving forward. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Patricia.
Okay. So thank you so much, David. Also, thank you to our panel for everything that you shared. Thank you to everyone that just is listening, because we know that that was a lot of information to go through and digest. We're looking forward to your questions and comments that you have this afternoon. So let's talk about how we are going to do that. Next slide, please, Katie. All right, so here are our ground rules, really participation guidelines for hybrid participation today for those that are in person and also virtual. So one of our aims is that we do want to hear from as many people as possible. Should you have something to share, in order to enable that, one thing we're asking everyone to do is to please keep whatever you're going to share to at least a minute and a half. You may see me if you're approaching that or even gone beyond that. I'll give you a friendly wave here to let you know you're at time, so peek at me. And then for those that are on Teams, if you see me pop on your screen an additional picture of Patricia, then you'll know that you are at time as well. For those that are in the room, we do have the microphones here for you all to utilize there. Again, everyone will remain in listen-only mode until you are acknowledged to speak. We do ask that we maintain a professional environment. If everyone would be cordial with your thoughts or what you may share, the questions that you have. And as a reminder, there are no regulatory decisions that are being made today. Specifically for those that are with us virtually today, and I do want to acknowledge that we have almost 900 folks that are with us today. So thank you for joining us in a virtual capacity. So for the virtual participants, what you'll need to do is to utilize your Teams toolbar that you have there at the top. If you're at your computer or mobile device, you'll see the hand to raise your virtual hand. If you tap that, that lets us know here in the room that you want to be recognized to speak. For those that are joining us on the phone, you'll need to press *5. That will let us know that you want to be recognized as well. Again, wait for me to acknowledge you to speak. You will need to manually unmute yourself once you've been acknowledged. So you'll see the microphone button there. Just toggle it, tap it to turn it on. And then for those that are on the phone, you'll press *6. So with that, we can hang out here on this slide and we are ready to open it up to Q&A. So if you're in the room and you have something, please feel free to come to the microphones. And then for those that are on Teams, please feel free to go ahead and raise your hand. I see several folks with their hand raised currently, so we will start within the room. Please do abide by the 1.5 minute time frame. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Alyssa Hayes, Senate EPW Minority. How can you speak a little bit to how the effects of the changes to these rules on performance throughout all of the nuclear industry, how those effects might be assessed, on what timeline, and then what might the NRC response look like if that assessment and the results of that performance assessment are undesirable?
Yeah, so I suppose we could assess that in multiple different ways. I'm going to attempt to answer. That's a good and challenging question. So as I mentioned, one of the categories that we're considering as we look at these rulemakings is a lot to do with NRC performance in terms of how we can maintain the same safe and secure reviews of applications and licensing actions in front of us, but to do it under shorter time frames than we historically have. If you look at recent actions by the agency, we're already achieving that for many of the licensing actions we've had recently. So one of the pieces of legislation that was passed in recent years was the Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act that was passed before the Advance Act. That law basically provided us with two specific timelines for specific types of actions that come before the agency for review. Some of those things fall under a 12-month timeline. Some of them fall under an 18-month timeline. The executive order directs us that we must complete those actions within those timeframes. And so a lot of the regulations are about us being able to meet those timelines. So one important measure on the agency is, will we be able to actually accomplish those reviews within that 12 and 18-month time frame? Your question was broader. And so, I think if I understand where you were getting at, we right now measure the performance of our existing licensees and as a part of our oversight process, and mostly measure them in terms of their compliance against the regulation. And, in cases where licensees fail to be in compliance, the typical pathway is that we'll issue findings the amount of violations, and that licensees have to correct those things in order to bring themselves back into compliance. I think it was actually mentioned by one of our commissioners at the RIC in the last couple of weeks. That process mostly doesn't actually even fall within the regulation itself. One of the pieces of the executive order actually directly goes to oversight. I think it's F. Is that right? Do I have it right? G, sorry. It's hard to keep them all straight. And in that case, first of all, within that process itself, we have flexibility as an agency if we see a licensee's performance starting to become not where we think it should be, for us, even without making any changes, to add additional oversight. So that's one piece. In addition to that, if we feel like the adjustments that we're making in the regulation or in any of our oversight processes are not achieving the right ends, we would likely make changes to be able to bring them back into line. We believe that the changes that we're making as a part of this process are justified based on the body of evidence of the oversight that we've been performing over a number of years and seeing trends move in a particular direction. But we're going to continue to monitor those trends. I hope that answers your question.
Almost, but go ahead.
So if we could, please everyone, I know that we do have about 9 people with their hands up online. I know that in the room we can't see that. So if we could maybe, not circle back to seconds until we have exhausted the list of folks that are interested. Okay. All right, let's go to teams. So Jeffrey, we see you with your hand up. We're elevating you in just a moment. We will be ready for you in the room. You should be able to unmute yourself now. Please do so, and we are ready for you in the room.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
We sure can.
All right, great. My name's Jeffrey Brumfield, Jeff Brumfield. I'm a reporter with National Public Radio. Sorry I didn't brave the snow today. Kind of wish I had now, but so my question for you is this: I've been reporting extensively on revisions to Department of Energy orders for the Nuclear Energy Office as part of the reactor pilot program, and I'm hearing a lot of parallels here. Changes to NEPA, changes to security requirements to make them performance-based. I guess I'm wondering, how much should we expect what you're doing to follow the changes in those orders? And then maybe you could say a little bit more about the sort of previous authorization by DOE and DOW, kind of how you see that working with your proposed rules.
I'll do my best, and I've got my lawyer sitting next to me so they can kick me under the table if I start going too far out of line. So the first thing I'm going to say is, as I mentioned, we've had partnership with Department of Energy for a long time, and we meet with them regularly about the kinds of issues that you were discussing. So like if you look at security, for example, we've had lots of conversations over the years, not just in the last 8 months. Our revisions related to our security regulation, for example, were things that we have been thinking about for a long time, even before this executive order. If anyone has ever observed or reviewed our security requirements, many of which were promulgated after the events of 9/11, they're very prescriptive in nature. We gave very precise expectations of what we expect our licensees to do. And as we've been thinking about it, we don't think that that is necessarily essential in terms of the way that we approach security. DOE did their own review, as far as I understand, and was pretty independent of ours. I often like to think about the interaction that we have with other federal agencies, less about doing things exactly the same way and more about being harmonious in the way that we do things so that there's a consistency and a logic to it. The way that DOE approaches security has some fundamental differences than what the NRC is responsible for related to our licensees. And so we have to approach it slightly differently, even if the end result we're going for, performance-based is sort of a buzzword. But the idea is what really matters is the consequences of the results of the regulation, more so than the specifics about how someone does something. I think we'll move on to the next question. I hope that at least gives you a little bit.
Thank you. So we're going to go to our next person on Teams, and I welcome anyone in the room. Should you have a comment or a question at any time, please come to the microphone so that we'll know that you have something. to be recognized for. So Jacqueline, we see you, we're elevating you, and we are ready for you in the room.
Hello, can you hear me?
We sure can.
Great. Thank you for having this meeting. I'm Jacqueline Drexler from Valley Cottage, New York, near Indian Point and the Hudson River. So the first thing I'd like to say is that the speakers are all under one name of a lady named Katie McCurry. So I don't know who the speakers are that you have at your table. But what I'd like to, I think David started. I did hear the name David at some point in the conversation. He said there are 90,000 hours that you've all spent on this. Does that about 1 hour per each of the 90,000 tons of radioactive waste around? I am very concerned about your new mission statement where you're saying it's for the benefit of society and the environment, balanced with safety and society. I do not believe that this is true. You are saying that you are protecting human beings against radiological effects, and your desire to change ELARA and LNT will not be protective of humans from radiological effects. I'm also very concerned about your extremely fast timeline. You're saying there are not many significant reworks, but to what I've seen, there are. I also would just like to really wonder about how independent this commission has ever been. David made this statement saying that this commission is as independent as we have ever been. But meanwhile, you have these outside pressures, external pressures from Congress to be more timely in your licensing actions, reducing regulatory burdens for licensees. So I'm very concerned about all of this. I think that your timeframes versus public safety is off track. And
Jacqueline, I
yep,
hate to interrupt. We are at time, but thank you so
okay,
much
that's
for
okay. That
for
was actually exactly what I was going to say, and I'll end there. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we do have someone in the room that has a question or comment. We're ready for you.
Diane Dorigo. Oh, now I hear it. I'm with the Nuclear Information and Resource Service, and actually started in 1986 when the NRC was in the process of updating 10 CFR 20 the last time, and it took until 92 to finalize that. I have a major concern with the portion of the regulation changes to do with radiation protection. And it looks like there's at least 4 specific rules that you went through today, one being a direct final order that would potentially change those radiation rules. I also want to point out that 90,000 hours by NRC staff, that's an enormous amount of time, but it took decades from when the NRC started making regulations with public input all along the way, many times the public feeling that that was not adequate at the time. Now what we're looking at is, it sounds like no change, no leeway on the 30-day comment period on these rules. And the concern is that what you will be doing is increasing the allowable releases into air and water, the allowable doses to the public, to workers, and that you will be attempting to set a below regulatory concern or determinant level that the public over the decades since this was proposed by the NRC in 1986 and 1990, Congress revoked below regulatory concern, and you're going to give us 30 days to comment on all of these things that your staff have had 90,000 hours to make the changes. So I'm concerned with the limited amount of public time, and that the focus is to put the public at greater risk when you should be actually changing the rules in the direction of improving public protection.
Okay, excuse me. I do want to make sure, because I don't want to come across as rude to anyone, but we do need to make sure that we maintain the environment. So everyone, I know these, what you're sharing is very important. We want to hear it. It's important to hear a variety of perspectives and thoughts, But if you see me wave at you or you see me come on screen, please do acknowledge that and make sure to, go ahead and abbreviate your comments at that point so that we can make sure that we provide space and room and grace for others that are also speaking. Okay, with that, we are going to go over to Teams. So Matt, we see you, we're elevating you. Feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself. We're ready for you in the room.
Hi, my name is Matt Waite. I'm a diagnostic and nuclear medical physicist in Los Angeles. So I share the previous two speakers' interest in the reforming and modernizing the NRC's radiation protection framework proposed rule. I guess this is more of a procedure clarification. So I'm on the website as directed in the presentation. It has a target publication date of April 30th. Is that intended to include the 30 days of public comment? I'm not seeing anywhere where, for example, the proposed language of this rule is laid out. So I'm wondering when we will be able to see the proposed language in order to comment on it, and if this April 30th deadline is meant to indicate the actual final non-reversible rule. And if that's the case, why is this being finalized so far ahead of the actual mandatory date of November of this year?
Thanks for the question. I just want to clarify, that's the date of us publishing the proposed rules, and then once it's in the Federal Register, the public will be able to comment, and then the final rules will follow in the November timeframe. So I just did want to clarify that. That date you see is the date for the NRC to publish in the Federal Register, or estimated, as Melissa stressed, in the Federal Register, and then that will start the clock for the public to, submit comments. So I did want to clarify that.
Thank you. We're going to go back to team.
Patricia, if I could just add on to that. So when we publish that Federal Register notice, that Federal Register notice for the proposed rule will include the number of days that's being allowed for public comment and the response date to that. That'll also go on regulations.gov. And a bit of a clarification, earlier in my presentation, I mentioned notice and comment rulemaking versus the direct final rule. Those notice and comment rules go out in both the proposed and final phase. The direct final rule goes out with a companion proposed rule. And in both cases, once the rule is published, as Jen indicated, the public is afforded an opportunity to comment, the duration of which is laid out in the notice.
All right, thank you. We're going to go to teams. So Ace, we see you with your hand raised. We're elevating you, and we are ready for you in the room.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I heard the term legal, I would like the legal and precise definitions of two terms that I heard. One is low consequence reactor. I can't imagine that there is such a thing, but then you had one that was even lower, I think, called a micro reactor. Could you tell me how much U-235 and P-239 is in each of those kinds of reactors, how much fission products are allowed in those reactors, and how far they're able to spread into the environment before they're no longer considered micro or low consequence? And then the other issue I wanted to consider, or have you consider, is in terms of protection of waste. San Onofre, near where I live, has 3.5 million pounds of waste, and we've heard that Iran wants to fly drone swarms and attack California. What protections does that waste have against an attack like that? And I'll stop there so as not to use too much time. Thank you very much again.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be disappointing in my answer. I would recommend that you watch that website that we mentioned and wait for those rules to get published, both so you can read the answers to the questions that you're asking and provide comment on the rule. And in addition, to the extent that we have a public meeting associated with the rule, please come to that meeting and pose your question, because I think you're going to get a much more satisfying answer.
Thank you. With that, we're going to go to Edwin. Edwin, we do see you, and we are elevating you. Feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. This is Edmund Lyman from the Union of Concerned Scientists. So overall, I'd just like to express my dismay with this process. You have stated that you're remaining independent, but what I'm looking for is an acknowledgement that these processes for rulemaking are not normal, that they are significant deviations from what the NRC has used in the past. And I just cite one example. If there are significant, technical or policy issues raised, difficult issues, you would have a regulatory basis document that would also go out for public comment. That step is completely omitted from this process. And I just can't see how, many of these issues are involved difficult technical and policy questions that the agency has struggled with for a long time. And I just can't see how they can be resolved so neatly in such a short period of time and maintain your integrity as a regulator. So overall, I'm greatly concerned about the process. Take one example, which has already been cited, the direction to reconsider the use of LNT and ALARA. Well, just pointing out that it was only a few years ago where the commission rejected a petition for rulemaking on this very question with a substantial technical basis for that. Only a few years have elapsed since then, and unless, we'll have to see, the proof will be in what you actually put out. But if you don't have actual technical documentation to justify any change that would, or reconsideration of those principles in radiation protection, then I would seriously question whether you are maintaining your integrity and independence as an agency. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We're going to go to our next person on Teams. Dave, we see you. We're elevating you. Feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay.
We're ready
Great.
for you in the room.
Thanks so much. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Thanks. Hi, Dave Allard here from Central Pennsylvania. I'm the former director of the Bureau of Radiation Protection here in Pennsylvania for almost 22 years. I was the official liaison to the NRC for half a dozen governors. And for about 20 years, I was one of the two state members of the Interagency Steering Committee on Radiation Standards and certified health physicist, medical health physicist. Questions regarding engagement of other agencies. First, thanks for doing this. Great job today. You guys have got an incredible job in front of you. Regarding 14300 5B specifically, the LNT ALARA, and the radiation protection regs in general, have you folks, this is a yes or no, have you folks engaged the ISCORS, which, as you know, is co-chaired by NRC and EPA with everybody else at the table? And have you engaged the 40-odd agreement states in all the states that actually utilize 10 CFR Part 20 in their own state regulations for regulating materials? And literally hundreds of thousands of medical X-ray facilities, users that use X-ray equipment, dental, medical, and such. I'm just concerned that that engagement. I've been beating this drum for probably 10 years now, with briefing the commission as the chair of the Conference of Radiation Control Program Directors. The uniformity of regs, the NRC's regs, DOE 835. OSHA, which is still tied to ICRP 2 in 1960, and EPA has a number of regs that are tied to ICRP 2, and you folks have a few of those too. But it's that whole, not only Part 20 in the NRC's regs, but I'm really concerned about all of the federal regulations and all the ties to FEMA and such. And one last thing, I'm also, okay, thanks. I just wanted to go on record.
Yeah.
I'm also the chair of the community advisory panel for the cleanup of TMI Unit 2. So thanks.
Thank you, Dave. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks. I can take that one. With respect to the other agencies, there's been a lot of coordination, particularly on the LNTLR rule with other agencies. There is a recognition of a whole of government approach of harmonization, as David mentioned, with also recognition that each agency has its own mission, but a harmonization and making sure we're not inconsistent across agencies. With respect to the agreement states, there's been a great deal of coordination with the agreement states generally, and then also on LNT Alara. We've had several government-to-government meetings with the agreement states, and then all the rules that affect what we call compatibility or adequacy, basically the rules that would affect then agreement state rules, go through what's called the Standing Committee of Compatibility, which has 2 agreement state representatives on it. And on many of the rules, we actually have an agreement state representative on our working group.
Thank you. Before we go on to our next person on Teams that has something to share with us today, I do want to remind everyone something from the public meeting notice. And so something that is very important today is to note that the questions and comments that we're seeking are really around what was shared today, the process, the overview, not necessarily the specifics that are going to be related to each one of those rulemakings. As David mentioned before, there will be subsequent meetings to address those individually. And at those periods, we definitely invite you. We want you to come back, share your thoughts and feedback. But for today, scope is what was shared initially and specifically relates like the process, the overview, questions related to those types of things. With that, I do see someone that came to the microphone in the room, so we'll transition to the room before we go back to Teams. We're ready for you.
Hi there, PJ Seal. I'm from the Breakthrough Institute. Thanks for taking the time to do this. Thank you to all the staff for doing all this work. The quick question is to kind of build off the last one is, it's been mentioned, frequently throughout the RIC that there is a lot of interagency collaboration, but I feel that collaboration is not always expanded upon. And I was just wondering if you'd be able to talk about, especially some of these rulemakings that will have substantial impact of, shared and overlapping regulatory purview, looking at the EPA and the DOE and the DOW. Can you just expand a bit of what that process has looked like in terms of having these collaborations, these conversations with other federal agencies?
I can start because so there's been a lot of in the development of the rules, a lot of coordination with our federal partners, particularly EPA, DOE, transportation. There is also the OIR interagency process also gives us a place to review each other's rules and to take that coordination and make it concrete in terms of providing the feedback once we see the actual rule the other agency is proposing. And then we have multiple meetings and discussions on those. There's briefings about the rules between the agencies. And so what starts out as sort of informal as development, once the rule is close to the finish line, there is a more concrete interagency review and dialogue.
Yeah, I want to add one additional piece. Again, some interactions were already initiated long before the executive order. One specific area that there is a lot of focus on when we meet with portions of the Department of Energy, Department of War on a weekly, monthly sort of cadence is specifically around advanced reactor technology, in part to understand what each other are doing, how we can assist each other. But in addition to that, we've been very focused during this period, making sure that we have contacts at multiple levels in the agencies so that we have staff, technical staff talking to technical staff, their managers and supervisors also interacting with one another on a regular basis, maybe different frequencies, but even like the head of agency, that there are contacts that are happening so that we have clarity about what each other's roles are, and also to make sure that we're seeing consistency up and down in both organizations.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we're going to go back to Teams. So Tom, we see you, we're elevating you. We're ready for you in the room.
Can you hear me?
We sure can.
You're in violation of the National Environmental Policy Act with respect to the rulemakings you're undertaking with regard to reprocessing, amending the radiation protection standards and waste disposal. I hereby make a formal request that you initiate and complete the environmental process under NEPA before you move forward with these rulemakings.
Thank you for your comment. We appreciate that. We're going to go to our next person on Teams. Oscar, we see you. We are elevating you. And we are just about ready for you in the room. We're ready for you. Please feel free to unmute yourself.
My name is Oscar Paulson. I'm with UR Energy. I have a question regarding the scope of the proposed rule modernizing NRC regulations for byproduct material use. The scope of that proposed rule seems to be essentially focused on 11E1, in other words, reactor byproduct material. And I was asking whether in the scope of that rule there would be consideration of 11E2 byproduct material as well, for the reason that there are some unique features related to the regulation of 11E2, such as the fact that there is no de minimis quantity of 11E2, nor is there any general licensing for 11E2 byproduct material as there would be source material. And that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, well, as I had commented on a previous question, I think that you're going to be much more satisfied if you watch our website for when that rule actually becomes public. And you're going to be able to, again, read in detail exactly the proposed changes that we're going to be making. And to the extent we have a public meeting associated with that rule, please watch for that date and come and ask your question, because you're going to be able to get people much smarter than me to be able to answer it.
Thank you. We do have someone at the microphone here. We're ready for you in the room.
Thank you. I'm Andrew Maurer with the Nuclear Energy Institute. I just wanted to acknowledge all the work that's been going on for almost a year now. And the website is looking good. It's really easy to find the information, and I think stakeholders can have a clear understanding of what's ahead and how to be prepared. So we're looking forward to engaging in the rulemaking process and providing comments. Obviously, change has been afoot at the NRC for over a decade. There's been a lot of different initiatives, and it's positive to see a number of these initiatives come together now. So it's pretty encouraging. I did want to ask you about public meetings. We know that for the first couple rules, there's been public meeting notices that have gone out, and obviously we're looking at 30-day public comment periods for those. It's very quick to get through that, and obviously I know all the stakeholders will do what they can to try and navigate that. We would just request or ask you to consider holding the public meetings earlier than you currently are planning. And we're not saying to change those you've already scheduled, but just going forward, if you could hold those a little earlier in the process, because the comment development is going to be really compressed across the board. And so if there are issues that we can receive a better understanding on what you're intending earlier on, it will really help us be able to provide you the best feedback during the public comment periods.
We appreciate your feedback.
Thank you. With that, we're going to go to Teams. Mary, we see you. We are elevating you in the room. We're ready for you. Feel free to go ahead and unmute your microphone.
Mary Olson, Generational Radiation Impact Project. I second the NEI comment about making the meetings earlier. I join Mr. Cochran in asserting the law of NEPA on the question of reprocessing. And then I'm going to paraphrase something I heard today, that part of why NRC exists, or the only reason it exists, is to protect human beings against the radiological impacts of nuclear operations. I agree, but I'm not a fan of the existing regulations. I never have been. And I ask, when will NRC center its regulations on those most harmed by radiation impacts? This is not the reference man. This is female bodies categorically, and of course, pregnancy and little girls more than any other age group that are female. That is the question. When will regulatory protection actually be centered on those who need the greatest protection? And then the second corollary to that is, I'm not a fan of units and regulations that cannot be independently verified. So some of your regulations actually do provide measurable quantities of radioactivity, but the general regs are completely unverifiable. and I'm not a fan of the old ones, and I'm not going to be a fan of the new ones. But is there some way in which your staff could address how your regulations are actually verifiable by those who they intend to protect?
The only thing I'm going to say in response, but thank you very much for your feedback, is that I hope you give a chance when you see our new regulations to review them and make a judgment once you have a chance to see them.
Thank you. With that, we're going to go to Nancy. Nancy, we see you and we are elevating you in the room. Please feel free to go ahead and unmute your microphone in just a moment. And we're ready for you. So Nancy, I see that you appear to be unmuted, but we cannot hear you in the room. Okay, with that, Nancy, we'll give you a moment to just kind of test some things technologically. We cannot hear you though. So with that, we'll keep you in the queue, but we're going to move on to the next person. That's Craig. Craig, we are elevating you in the room. Please feel free to unmute your microphone. Sorry. Craig, in order to unmute, you'll have to tap your microphone button there on top of your team screen. You're still muted locally on your device. We're just giving it a second to see if you can unmute on your side. You are unmuted on our end. Okay, we're not hearing anything from Craig in the room.
Can you hear
Craig,
me now? Can you hear
yes,
me
Nancy.
now? Okay.
We can, Nancy. Just one moment. So, Craig, we will try to keep you in the queue as well. But Nancy, I'm glad that you were able to work through your technology issue. We can hear you, and we're ready for you.
Sorry, I had to change to a different microphone. I really would love to support what Mary just said as a woman and a lot of the other comments, but I want to tell you about my own experience. I was working at the World Trade Center on 9/11. I was decided to move out of the city because of the terrorist threat there. So I moved to Westchester, less than a mile from Indian Point. Then I learned that emails recovered had showed that Indian Point, the nuclear plant here, had been targeted, that they had considered that as a target. 7 years after getting here, I got cancer, very serious cancer, a tumor the size of a grapefruit. Lately, there's a Harvard study that is just out showing that people living near nuclear plants are at much greater risk for cancer deaths. Then last week, Secretary of Energy Chris Wright came to our plant here at Indian Point and asked for it to be reopened. That would mean more unsecured radioactive material in the spent fuel pools. That would be more tritiated water released into the air and coming down as rain in our area. That would mean more cancer. And when the gentleman said that they are reconsidering the post 9/11 rules, that just, I assume that they're not reconsidering them to strengthen them. What you need to be doing is strengthening them.
Nancy, I apologize for interrupting. We are at time. I actually gave a bit more just as you were speaking through your comments. Thank you so much for sharing that, but we are at time.
I would like to just
Thank you again, Nancy. With that, we're going to circle back to Craig one more time before we continue to go through the queue. So Craig, we're going to elevate you quickly just to see if you are able to unmute your microphone locally. Just giving it a moment or two. You'll have to tap the microphone button that you see on your screen. Okay. Unfortunately, we're unable to hear you, Craig. We do thank you for participating in the meeting today. Please feel free to stay in the queue, but unfortunately, we could not hear you. With that, we're going to go to our next person that's on Teams, Matthew. We're elevating you in the room. Once elevated, please feel free to go ahead and unmute your microphone. We are ready for you now.
Awesome, thank you. So my name is Matt Williams, and I'm a medical physicist and RSO in DC. I'm excited, like a lot of people, to read the new rules. My question was, what was the starting process for these rules? Like, did ACUME have anything to do in the revisions of 10 CFR 35 rules? Was there anyone outside of the NRC group that participated in developing these rules? Professional organizations, AAPM, HPS, or something?
So what I would say is that there's not a one-size-fits-all answer to that question, because as was mentioned earlier, some of the rulemakings that are engaged as a part of what we put under the umbrella of EO 1400 were rulemakings that were already underway. And for some of those rulemakings, we were using processes that we've been using for decades, where we have a lot of engagement with a variety of stakeholders. In some cases, some of the rulemakings that we are currently engaged in, we've had less of the kinds of engagements that you're talking about, and we're going to be using our public comment process in order to get some feedback. Jen also mentioned a little bit earlier that in some cases we have specific intergovernmental partnerships, including with our agreement states, where we get input from them. So there's not a one-size-fits-all answer to what you're asking, and I don't want to get into the specifics about every single rule. There will be opportunities, as we mentioned before, as those rules come out, so that you can have interactions about those ones in specific.
Thank you. Rhonda, we see that you are in the queue next, and we are elevating you in the room so that we can hear your question or comment. Feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself. We are ready for you. Rhonda, on my end.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you. I really have a very general comment. I live in Florida, and I have worked on issues regarding St. Lucie Power Plant, Turkey Point, and the proposed Levy County facility. We have worked closely with NRC staff who admit that they are 95% paid by the industry they regulate. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But if you combine that with our current federal administration, which almost none of the public currently trust, especially when it comes to environmental regulation. And if you go onto the regulations.gov site, I invite anybody to do this. Just go to regulations.gov, and what you see is a big pink box that says, submit your deregulatory recommendations. Impacted by an existing rule or regulation, share your ideas for deregulation by completing this form. That is the very first thing you are invited to do. And we go onto that site often to accomplish positive changes for people, for public health, for the environment, for species. Every rule that is displayed that is in accordance with any of Trump's executive orders are always to take away protections. This is a very bad time, and it's not a good look. And you're talking about radiation, so I don't know that there's anything that can be more dangerous than that. Doing it now under this administration, under one of those executive orders, I just don't think it's a good look at all. Thank you for your time.
I do want to address one particular point in the comment, just as a correction to better understand the NRC's fee collection. So NRC is actually funded from taxpayer dollars. We're required under the law to recover fees from our licensees of all classes, including reactor licensees. Most of those fees are generated by electricity ratepayers or users of services that our licensees offer. Just want to make sure that the public understands that.
Thank you. I do want to do a quick time check as well. It is 3:24 currently. We have 7 people that are in queue right now for questions. The next person that we have that's coming forward is Dave. Dave, we are elevating you. Feel free to go ahead and share your comment.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Dave Kraft. I'm with Nuclear Energy Information Service in Chicago. We've been a nuclear watchdog for 45 years and are quite disturbed by all of the executive orders and the problems that they will create for the agency and the public. I want to address a comment on context. David earlier mentioned that the NRC is an independent agency, but then he concluded his remarks by pointing out that the executive orders have very specific deadlines which you must adhere to. There's sort of an inherent conflict in that, and I understand the political context of having to go along with the orders, but there's a bigger context called the real world that I think the NRC needs to pay attention to. Some imperfect examples is how NRC in the past even has not allowed climate to be introduced in certain proceedings, and we have an administration which is environmentally ignorant, which denies climate at all. Yet we know very well that it was climate that partially wrecked the reactor in Nebraska a few years back with the derecho. So we seem to have a conflict of context here, that you're going to be compliant to executive orders that just don't fit in the real world. So my question, and I would like an answer to this, is there a mechanism within the NRC where you have the either right or obligation to address Congress or a very environmentally ignorant president and say, we cannot comply with this executive order because the real world says it doesn't operate that way? Thank you.
Before our panel speaks, I do want to remind everyone of our ground rules for the meeting. Remember those guidelines that we talked about, making sure that we maintain a professional and cordial environment. We definitely do not want to go beyond the realm of that. So please be mindful in your word choices, commentary, as you articulate your thoughts, share your questions and your comments, that we maintain, of course, a respectful and cordial environment and professional environment. Thank you.
Yeah, I actually do want to respond to that. And what I'll say is I'm not authorized to speak on behalf of our commission. Only the chairman has got that power. I can talk to you about my observations, which is I think that each of our commissioners feel an obligation to fulfill their responsibilities to review rules and to vote on them, which is, what they're empowered to do. And, my view is that they're going to take the time that they think that they need in order to make those decisions. And that's, their right as commissioners of this agency.
Thank you. I want to do another quick time check. We are at 3:27. This meeting was scheduled to end at 3:30. I did check in with our panel, and in the interest of making sure that we hear those that are in queue currently, we are going to stay on to take the last few folks that were in queue. Actually, let me note who the last person was so that everyone will be aware. So we will go through our questions up to Paul Gunter will be our last person with a question for the afternoon, both virtual and on Teams. And with that, we will go to our next person in queue. Andy, we are elevating you. Feel free to go ahead and unmute your microphone. We're ready for you in the room.
Hi, this is Andy Correa with Holland and Knight. Just a quick question. I was wondering if you can speak to what extent you anticipate updates to reg guides or other guidance documents in conjunction with these rules, and what the timing would look like for that process relative to the rulemaking timeline.
So for the most part, when the rules are published, they will be accompanied by guidance. And so that's good. That's a general rule. I will say that there are a couple of exceptions, the most prominent of which is there are certain rules that are being published as proposed rules that are kind of new and novel, where we don't necessarily have an accumulation of guidance, that there will be some guidance that will be with the proposed rule, and that will likely be further developed before the final rule. So again, for the most part, there will be guidance that will be associated with the rules themselves, so that you'll be able to see, more details about what the agency expects in terms of meeting our rules.
Thank you. Before we go to our next person, because it is 3:29, and just with the consideration of everyone's time, maybe there are some that were anticipating to end at 3:30 exactly. If you feel that you need to leave, feel free. No pressure to do so. One quick thing, Katie, if you would advance one quick slide. This is just a quick preview in case anyone does need to leave. It's very important to us to collect feedback from the public meeting. So after the public meeting, please do go to our public meeting site and click on that meeting for the link that's highlighted red there for recent meetings, so that you can find the feedback form. Katie, if you'll go back for me. And with that, we're going to go to our next person on Teams. So this is a person that we have on the phone. This is a phone number that ends in 4779. 4779. We're elevating you. In order to unmute yourself, please do press *6. And we are ready for you in the room.
Good afternoon. I hope you can all hear me. My name is Michelle Lee. I'm in New York. So I have sort of one fact and then a question. So the observation is, I appreciate what you're struggling to do. You're as public servants, you're a little bit between a rock and a hard place here with the directives of the executive orders and other stresses, particularly time stress. And I also appreciate that you can't provide answers to any of these specific questions that pertain to health and safety, since those rules have not been issued yet. And I appreciate that you're answering questions. So what I would like actually is, can we get a commitment that when the rules are published, you will have a similar kind of public meeting where people can ask questions, and there will be people who have knowledge who can answer the questions in a public meeting. I was a little bit concerned about, and I wrote it down in quotes, one of the individuals on your panel who said that you can comment, we can respond, quote, to the extent that we have a public meeting associated with that rule. To me, that end of quote, that comment was a little bit cagey, and I would like to get a commitment that there will be public meetings. Thank you. With answers, so Q and A, and particularly with A.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. Sounded sort of cagey. So our intent right now is to hold public meetings for most of the proposed rules. There are a few rules that we haven't made a decision yet about whether we're going to hold a public meeting or not. Primarily, we're using as a basis in terms of what we feel like is in the agency's best interest, in terms of whether it would be fruitful to be able to hold a meeting. But that is an exception rather than rule. Our intent is to hold public meetings with questions and answers for the majority of the proposed rules.
Thank you. Chris, you're next in the queue. We are elevating you in the room, and we are ready for you. Feel free to go ahead and unmute your microphone.
Good afternoon. This is Chris Allred with Rocky Mountain Peace and Justice Center from Boulder, Colorado. Thank you for the time to speak today and for the extended time to hear from the public. I would like to respectfully request that NRC please extend the comment period on these new rules. I have serious concerns about how these new rules following the executive order appear to be expediting the process for approving nuclear energy rather than being true to the stated mission for providing a benefit to society and the environment. As a grassroots community organizer at Rocky Mountain Peace and Justice Center, we're in communication with impacted communities, including indigenous nations, who need to see rules which are more protective of public health and the most vulnerable, rather than expediting permits. Data centers and small modular nuclear reactors are imposing their industry upon communities who don't want them. The commitment to nuclear technology lasts many, many generations, much longer generational implications than technology for automobiles. We advocate for the principles of nuclear guardianship developed by eco-philosopher Joanna Macy. It's important to consider the context that these rules are being proposed at the same time as a new nuclear arms race. The US is investing approximately $2 trillion over the next 30 years to modernize nuclear weapons. And so again, I urge the NRC to please extend the public comment period in order to hear from all the impacted communities. Thank you.
We appreciate that feedback about the public comment periods.
Thank you. Sarah, you are next in line. We are elevating you in the room. Please do feel free to go ahead and unmute your microphone. We are ready for you.
Hello, thank you. My name is Sarah Abramson. I'm from the C10 Research and Education Foundation in the Seabrook, New Hampshire area near the Seabrook reactor. I agree entirely with the statements made by Mary Olson and Dr. Lyman and many other true subject matter experts related to the radiation protection standards, so I'll spend my time on a different question. What I didn't see in the PowerPoint presentation was any mention of the Executive Order 14303, Restoring Gold Standard Science. And that one is piquing my interest because I also saw something in your slide about increasing the rigor, the review and the standards for the public for contentions and interventions. And my group has experience in being a successful intervener that actually produced license amendments. And that occurred because the licensee and the NRC staff was relying on science that was not rigorous enough. And we had to provide an external, unbiased, peer-reviewed body of evidence that the agency itself and the licensee itself did not produce on its own. So a particular part of that EO calls for, quote, reproducibility, rigor, and unbiased peer review. And I wanted to know how in any of these rule changes you plan on imposing those requirements on both licensee applicant and license amendment information, as well as NRC staff reviews.
Yeah, I'm going to give the same answer I gave to some of the earlier questions, that I think that you're going to be much more satisfied as the rules come out and as we have public meetings around those rules to be asking that question. You're going to get a much more thorough answer.
And David, I'll just, you mentioned the hearings, that rule is published, so we strongly encourage everyone, if they're interested, to submit comments, and we will be having a public meeting, I believe, next week on that rule.
Thank you. Our next person in queue on Teams is Matt. Matt, we are elevating you. And after Matt, we do have 2 additional folks on Teams that are in queue. Matt, we are ready for you. Feel free to go ahead and unmute your microphone.
Hi, I appreciate you extending the question time. I had one additional procedure question. So colloquially, the word reconsider can have a couple of different meanings. For example, if I'm reconsidering what I want to have for dinner tonight, I can think and decide, actually, I'd like to have the thing that I had already planned on doing. So my question is, as a potential option under the executive order to reconsider certain aspects of the regulations, did the NRC consider it an option to review the existing science and keep the existing recommendations in place, or did they interpret that as a mandate to change the existing regulation in some way?
That's a great question. So again, there's not a one-size-fits-all answer, I think, to the question that you're asking, but something that I didn't say earlier that has struck me in this process, and that's from the earliest days of the way the working groups approached their work, that for the most part, I don't know, I actually can't think of any exceptions off the top of my head. All of the proposals that are in these rules were generated by NRC staff in terms of the things that they were thinking about that they believe would add value, both in terms of, as I mentioned, you know, how can we do things more efficiently while maintaining our safety and security standards? And are the things that we're doing ourselves or that we're asking our applicants and licensees to do that don't really make sense in terms of being able to provide, you know, more safety or security than is already being provided in some alternative way? And so I don't think that we've approached this from the perspective of someone saying you must do this, and therefore we're just gonna follow suit with that. It's been much more thoughtful from a, you know, perspective of folks who have expertise in these areas.
Thank you. Stephen, we see that you are next in the queue. We're elevating you and we are ready for you in the room. Please do feel free to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Stephen, on our end, you are still muted. You'll have to look along your Teams toolbar to press the microphone to unmute yourself. I'll give it just a second more to give you a chance. Okay, with that, what we're going to do, Stephen, we'll keep you in the queue because you are our second to last person. We're going to go to our next person, who is Paul. Paul, we're elevating you. Please do feel free to go ahead and unmute your microphone.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, Paul Gunter, Beyond Nuclear here in Tacoma Park. You know, I was really interested in this NRC staffer who, you know, his comment was that, you know, that a lot of these rule changes are, you know, were actually established by the staff. But, you know, it was in August of 2021 that the NRC staff concluded that the linear no threshold dose model remains the soundest regulatory basis for radiation protection. You know, in that process, they denied 3 petitions for rulemaking, which I, you know, note took careful study and, you know, roughly the best of 6 years to go through. And you also wound up with a scientific consensus of some of the more robust or authoritative bodies here in the United States, including the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. And I'm just wondering, what is it, if you could just enlighten me, that prompted to reopen such a thorough, you know, process that you've been going through since 2015 to be accomplished in such a short, truncated time frame? I mean, enlighten me.
That's the easiest question so far today. What prompted us is Executive Order 14300. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we're going to circle back to Stephen. Stephen, we're going to elevate you one more time just to see if we are able to hear you in the room before we wrap up Q&A. You should be able to unmute your microphone. Again, you'll have to look along your Teams toolbar at the microphone image to unmute yourself, and I'll give it just a moment. Okay, unfortunately, Stephen, we did not see where the microphone has been muted. Perhaps you may be having technical difficulties on your end, but thank you for raising your hand. With that, we have gone through our queue that we allotted for the additional time. So as we go ahead and wrap up our Q&A, Katie, if you go to the next slide, I do want to say thank you, and we're going to have closing remarks by David, but before that, I do want to say thank you to everyone for participating today, just from a facilitation standpoint. For working together, seeking to abide by the ground rules that we sought out today. Thank you for bringing your candid questions, candid thoughts, your perspectives. We value that in general. And so one other thing, just as a quick reminder, please do go to the NRC website, the same place that you went to find the meeting notice for today. You'll see over on the right-hand side where there's a place to look at meetings that previously occurred, and you can fill out our meeting feedback form. We definitely would love to hear your thoughts. And with that, I'm going to hand it. We'll go to the next slide, and I'll hand it over to David for closing remarks.
Thanks again. And thank you for everyone who's participated with us today, both here in the room and also the folks online. I can tell you the folks here that are working know that the people we work for are the American public, and we care very much about what people think about how we're doing. And we appreciate all the feedback that we've been able to get today. It helps inform us in terms of how we're going to continue to engage with you around this process as we have these future public meetings. And I just want to again say thank you for coming here today.
And with that, we're concluding the meeting. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.